The 2018-19 NHL attendance figures have been fully released, and I want to take a look at how they compare to last year. Which teams in the NHL had the best attendance last year? We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, the attendance figures for the 18-19 season are out, and I wanted to do a quick comparison for how they went last year compared to the year before. As we know, from year to year, there certainly is some variance from team to team here, but there are some teams that are pretty consistent here with what they pull in for attendance figures and ticket sales here. So let's take a look here at who were the top teams that have the best attendance during the 18-19 season. Now, these are ranked according to percentage to capacity. Now, you're also going to notice some of these are over 100%. So if you're wondering how do you get over 100% attendance, basically a lot of these arenas do have standing room only type of tickets that can be sold. So obviously once the full 100% of the seats are sold, then that can be added on, which explains how they get over 100%. Now we got to factor in as well, some of these teams might have had games at offsites throughout the year, like in the outdoor games or anything like that, so they could be skewed just slightly from the few teams that had those different types of games throughout the year. But let's jump in here to the top NHL teams with attendance. We'll go through 1 through 31 and compare how they ranked this year compared to last. So first up, here's no big surprise here. The Chicago Blackhawks had 107.2% to capacity throughout the season. The Chicago Blackhawks have been leading the NHL in attendance for the better part of about a decade or more now. It's been quite a number of years that they've been ranked here in first place. So obviously that should not come as any surprise for people who watch these numbers and been paying attention to them here over the years. The Hawks have done a phenomenal job. Of course, before their resurgence, before they got guys like Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews and all that, there was a point where attendance was down. But really, ever since those guys have come into the picture and improved the team, they've really been near the top of the NHL here pretty much ever since. Now, jumping up 2 spots to second place this year was the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, the Golden Knights were a hot ticket draw pretty much right out of the get-go last year, which put them in 4th place. They did increase their percentages this year to 105.5% to capacity, whereas last year they were at 103.9%. So that continues to build here on the second year. Of course, having as much success as they did in year 1 likely did factor into that, but anybody who says the hockey can't work in the desert is completely wrong and insane here. Obviously, they've done phenomenally well and continue to draw as one of the top teams here in the NHL. Now in 3rd place, we got the Minnesota Wild, who finished with 105.3%, but even though they were 3rd place, which actually knocks them down a spot, they were 2nd the year before, but Vegas knocked them down a peg here. Their attendance numbers are down slightly. The year before, they were at 106%, so they dropped 0.7% here year over year. Now in 4th place, we've got the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are up 2 spots. They were in 6th the year before. They were at 102.4% to capacity during this past year, and which is up slightly from the year before, which was an even 102. So they have an increase here of 0.4%. Now the Leafs are usually a tough ticket to buy if you're a Maple Leafs fan. The tickets are expensive and they are very hard to get, and a lot of the ones that you can get a little bit more easily are the cheaper seats. But even the cheaper seats, from my understanding here, are not overly cheap here at all. In 5th place, you got the Winnipeg Jets at 102.1%, which pretty much is exactly the same as last year. They're in the same place. They were 5th 2 years in a row now, and their attendance was exactly 102.1% 2 consecutive years. Even though they have one of the smaller arenas, they still fill it night after night, year after year. Ever since they've returned to Winnipeg, they've been a terrific draw there. Now in 6th place as well for the 2nd year in a row also is the Nashville Predators. Even though they're in the 6th place for the 2nd consecutive year, their numbers are continuing to rise here. They finished with 101.9% during the 18-19 season, which is an increase of 0.8%. They were at 101.1 the year before. So obviously Nashville has done quite well here in recent years. A terrific draw there. Nashville seems like one of the more fun arenas to visit as well. In 7th place, we have the Pittsburgh Penguins, again for the 2nd year in a row. So that's teams 5 through 7 here that have maintained their position for the 2nd straight season. The Penguins finished with 101.1% to capacity, which is identical to what they did last year. So the numbers are pretty much exactly there on par for Pittsburgh. So Winnipeg, Nashville, and Pittsburgh maintaining their positions there, 5, 6, and 7 for the 2nd straight year. Now, we still have some more teams at 100% capacity or better. The number 8th spot this year belongs to the Boston Bruins, who finished at an even 100%. Obviously puts them tied for 8th, which is an increase of 3 spots. They were in the 11th spot last year. So even though their numbers are pretty much the same, obviously some other teams have kind of gone up and down the rankings here, so they've moved slightly in the system, but still, overall, Boston's always a solid draw, and they have no problem filling the barn there at the TD Garden for sure. Now, tied for 8th as well is the Tampa Bay Lightning, also at 100% for the second consecutive year. Tampa Bay obviously has one of the bigger arenas, 19,092 is their capacity, and they fill that night after night. They've also moved up here 3 spots as well. So obviously there was more teams last year than this year that hit 100% or better, as you can tell here. Some of these teams that are at 100% and have moved up, this shows that there was a few teams, which we'll get to here momentarily, that were at 100% or better last year that did not accomplish that for the second straight year. Also tied for 8th is the Washington Capitals, who did see a fairly significant drop. They finished at 100% to capacity, which is still pretty solid, but drops them 7 spots overall. They were at 104% the year before. Obviously, they was their Stanley Cup championship year that year, but I thought maybe coming after the year after winning the Cup, that interest might even peak even more, but it didn't. I guess we'll see what happens with their attendance. There's certainly nothing to be concerned about. Being at 100% is an excellent spot, in my opinion, here, but there is an interesting story there, something with one of the bigger drops at a 4% decrease. Now at number 11 this year is the Montreal Canadiens, who were one of the teams that were over the 100% capacity last year. Last year they were at 100.1%, and this year they dropped down to 98.9. Of course, their year before wasn't as successful, and we know Montreal Canadian fans are pretty hardcore there. They want a winning product, which they certainly demand and expect year after year, which I completely understand. And I think after a frustrating year might explain why the numbers are down here a little bit, but I certainly expect them to bounce back up, because they certainly did surprise many last year and prove that they were not as going to be as low in the rankings as many had thought. And there's much more optimism now, I think, in that city than there was before here. Now, number 12 here, we get the LA Kings, who are another team that dropped from the 100% mark downwards. They were at 100.1%, just like Montreal the year before, and they dropped down to 98.7%, and they were not able to get to that 100% mark here yet again. That drops them 4 spots down. Obviously, a not a great year in LA might have contributed to that. Many fans likely see them going through a rebuild, which might kind of remove some of the more casual fans, but I guess we'll see here. Overall, not terrible numbers, still pretty high up here above the halfway point of the league. At number 13, we've got the Edmonton Oilers, which was a nice increase for them. That moves them up 5 spots from the year before, although that gets them a pretty much the same result, though. Their attendance figures are almost identical. For the second straight year, they finished at 98.4% to capacity, but of course, with some other teams falling, that moves them up the list here. They were 18th last year, moved up 5 spots to be 13th after the 18-19 season. Now the number 14 team here, we have the San Jose Sharks, who also fell a little bit in the standings here when it comes to attendance. Their capacity is 17,266, and they finished with a 98.3% to capacity filling here, whereas the year before they were at 98.9. So that's a 0.6% drop in attendance, but it still moves them up here overall in the standings by 3 spots. Tied for 15th, we have 2 teams with Dallas and Philadelphia. That puts the Stars, moving them up 5 spots here. They did have a bit of an increase. This year they finished with 98.1%, where the year before they were at 97.7%. So a nice 0.4% increase there in Dallas. However, in Philly, it was a bit of a dip. They finished with 98.1%, where the year before they were 99.9%. So pretty much another team that was pretty much exactly 100% here that falls down, which drops them a couple spots here compared to last year's ranking. So attendance has been down slightly here in Philadelphia. At number 17, we have the Red Wings, who finished at 98%. The year before, they were one of the teams at 100, so a 2% drop, and drops them 4 spots here overall. Of course, the Red Wings going through a bit of a rebuild right now might be contributing to that, but I guess we'll see. Overall, not too concerning, but there is a drop of 2% in Detroit. In 18th spot, we have the Anaheim Ducks, which is a jump in 3 spots for them in the standings. They were 21st last year. The Ducks increased their attendance to 97.9%. Last year, they were 96.9%, so we saw a 1% increase in Anaheim, which is nice. Considering the year they had, overall, that's nice to see an increase there for sure. The New York Rangers are down slightly. They were in 19th spot this year, but last year they were 16th, so that's a 3-spot drop. They only managed to get 96.2% this past year, whereas the year before was 99.1%, so almost a 3% difference there with the New York Rangers. I would hope that picks up here, as they have a lot of good, young, exciting players, and things are certainly looking to improve here with the Rangers organization and the product on the ice. So we'll see if they can get that back up, but that's certainly a fairly significant drop there in New York. The number 20th team, the Calgary Flames, also suffered a fair bit of a dip here as well. They only dropped down one spot from 19th to 20th compared to the year before, but they finished with 95.9%, whereas the year before they were at 98%. So that's just over a 2% drop, which is a fairly substantial drop really overall, especially the year that the Flames had. They had one of the best seasons they've had in a long time, and still continue to have a little bit of a struggle there at the ticket gate. In 21st spot, we have the Vancouver Canucks, which moves them up a couple of spots from the year before. They were 23rd in the 17-18 season. They finished with a 95.3% to capacity, whereas the year before they were at 95.6. So not a whole lot of variance there in Vancouver. Obviously, I would hope that increases more here, as the excitement should hopefully continue to build here with a lot of their young players that they have on the ice. In the 22nd spot, we have the Colorado Avalanche, which is a jump in 3 spots for them. They finished with 95.1%, which is a nice increase. The year before, they were only at 87.1%. So that's a substantial increase there for the Avalanche. Obviously, having a successful year, getting into the playoffs after really bottoming out the year before, certainly has gone a long ways here to help that attendance figure. The Buffalo Sabres were down a fair bit. Maybe there's actually a sense of frustration growing in Buffalo after all this time. Buffalo is one of those markets that seem to have drawn, the ticket sales have been really good no matter what, even through tough times. It might be finally starting to weigh on some of those fans, as we saw a pretty significant drop of almost 6% here, 93.9% to capacity, which was a big drop from 99.8% the year before, and drops the Sabres down 8 spots in the ranking. So that's a big blow in Buffalo. They need to get things going and finally get out of this rebuild here. So hopefully we'll see some bigger improvements in Buffalo for next year. The New Jersey Devils are in 24th spot, which is only 1 spot down from last year. Minor change there. They finished at 92.1% this year, whereas 92% last year. So only up 0.1%, but at least it's trending in the right direction here. Columbus at number 25 is down 1 spot as well. Obviously, they finished with pretty much the same attendance, though, both 91.8% the last 2 years. So very little change in Columbus. Hopefully that won't take a dip here. They very well are at risk to lose some big-time free agents this summer, so hopefully we don't see things drop off too much in Columbus. The Blues are down a fair bit, and it likely is contributed to the very poor start they had to the season, would be my guess. But they certainly had a big drop. But after winning the Cup, I would imagine that pumps back up next year. The Blues were down 5 spots, down to 26 this year. Finished with a 90.7% to capacity, whereas last year they were at 95.9%. So I know they did well in the playoffs, so we'll see if that pumps back up coming up to the next regular season here. The Arizona Coyotes moved up slightly here as well, but even though they only moved up 2 spots to 27th, they did see a nice percentage increase. Last year they were at 76.2%, but they jumped up to 81.7%, so that is a nice increase in Arizona. Obviously had a little bit more success on the ice as well, and hopefully they can keep that going. They got new ownership now, and we'll see if they can finally get things figured out long term here. They need a long-term arena situation figured out, and until they do, it's going to be hard to really get this improved here. The New York Islanders moved up 2 spots to 28th. Obviously, the Islanders are in a bit of a unique situation there, where they play in Brooklyn and have some games at the Coliseum. Certainly interesting, but their attendance is up a bit from the year before. They finished at 78.9% compared to 75.9% the year before. So obviously, at least it's going in the right direction. The Panthers continued to struggle and dropped even further. Only moved down 1 spot, but their attendance went to 78.2% of capacity, where they were at 81.3% the year before. So obviously that's a dip in the wrong direction here, but with all the moves they're expected to make, hopefully if that doesn't draw the fans, I'm not really sure what will moving forward. The number 30th team is the Carolina Hurricanes, 76.7%, which was a big increase actually. It moves them up 1 spot. They were last the year before at 71.3%. So that's over a 5% increase. Obviously goes to show how much winning helps, and having fun on the ice with their storm surge likely contributed to that as well. And dead last in the league, going down 4 spots, another fairly substantial drop here for Ottawa. Obviously they finished with 76% to capacity, 85.3%. So obviously that's not a good sign, but obviously, as we know, is when teams go through rebuilds, we likely see this kind of drop, and I know many of the fans there have turned somewhat against the ownership group, so we'll see what happens in Ottawa. They need to get things turned around on the ice, in ticket sales, and hopefully get a new ownership group there as well, which would be a huge help. So that is all your list of attendance figures for the 18-19 season. We certainly saw some teams go up and down. Certainly nice to see Chicago continue to lead the NHL here. It goes to show those fans are pretty rabid for hockey, and they love their Hawks no matter what here, even though they're going through some tough times. They're still getting tons of fan support, and it's nice to see some other smaller markets as well get some increases as well. So, of course, as always, want to hear your thoughts and opinions on these ticket sales and attendance figures. Let me know what you think were contributing factors to some of these teams increasing or decreasing, and we can continue the conversation down in the comments. If you're new to the channel, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all the breaking news for all 31 NHL teams, so stay tuned at Top Shelf Hockey, and we'll keep you all up to date around the NHL. Thank you very much for watching, and we will catch you next time.